Yeah, Why You Can't Love Yourself by Dr. K. And there's an interesting thing to be said that I don't think I've said this before actually. I don't think self-loathing is ever really helpful, but I don't know to what extent I think self-love is good either. Like I think you should be comfortable with yourself, but not. I think you should generally focus on other people. It's like finding Horcruxes to put your soul into. No, if you find enough of them, in theory, it's not a bad idea, I guess.
The reason that it's so hard to love yourself is because you know you, right? Like, you know.
That's true. I think other people they tend to judge you by your actions, whereas you tend to judge yourself by your thoughts to some extent, which is just it's a world of difference sometimes, and all the stuff that you think but don't do is gives one a very different idea of oneself.
Oh, this person really could be doing so much better. And they kind of choose not to. Even if the self-loathing is justified, is it productive? When you look at your thoughts of self-loathing, who is doing the looking? Because the self-loathing is inside the mind, which is the object that you are observing. I spent so much time in my own head. And the more time I spend in my head, what do you think happens? Does the loathing get...
All right. Hallelujah. Now, where are my thingies? There we go.
better? No, it gets worse. Is self-love really the answer? I just need to learn to be happy by myself, be happy by myself, be happy alone, be happy alone, be happy alone. And then, are you okay, bro? Yes,
Like the whole notion of like I can be alone on an island and still be happy. Well, maybe it's true, but why would you want to if you didn't have to? I feel like people do a lot of stuff if they have to. Doesn't mean you should if you can do otherwise.
need to learn to be happy by myself first. Seems like when it comes to the topic of loneliness and dating, you always see self-love being brought up. Love yourself first before getting into a relationship. If you don't love yourself, then how can you love others? I understand the rationale. If you're miserable and get into a relationship, it won't solve your problems. Instead, it'll just spread your misery to your partner. It'll drain them constantly.
Well, I feel like that's maybe another point. When you're going into a relationship, not that I have much experience in this regards, but like when you're going into a relationship, the whole notion of being desperate for a relationship, probably not a good idea. It means you're going to let the other person get away with stuff that they probably shouldn't let them get away with, and you might choose someone who is actually a real piece of work. But I think in that case, it's better to have like a good friend base, to have like a solid foundation, certainly be secure in who you are, but to have people who you can use for companionship rather than being just this desperate, like I need someone to be around, and use that as a motivation for choosing your person who you want to spend the rest of your life with. I think you could go really poorly if you're just this like desperate, lonely sort of individual.
Give you validation and support without receiving anything in return. However, when I see the topic of self-love online, it feels like you must be an enlightened monk who has achieved self-actualization before you even enter the dating market. Just taking a walk outside, you'll meet tons of people who are conventionally unattractive or have horrible character who are in relationships. It could be loving or abusive. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they are in one despite not having look smacks or being a kind person. My conclusion from all of this is that dating, just like many things in life, boils down to a game of luck. Your attempts to gain wealth, status, and improve your looks and skills are all to increase your luck of finding someone.
That might not actually be entirely wrong, because I do think to some extent it is just like literally a numbers game of like the odds of you getting the person you exactly want at that moment are probably quite low. But if you keep doing it, eventually you will find someone. It's a question of like perfect causality versus sufficient causality, if you will. Like I guess I don't know if perfection really exists, so I tend to just think like, yeah, divine providence perhaps guides people together to some extent sometimes, with regards to like choosing a mate. Like, just I don't know how I feel about that, actually. Ignore that.
Attractive, but that outcome will never be guaranteed. Some people will lose. I'm not implying a black-pilled rhetoric that you shouldn't work on yourself, but it seems like everyone tells you you must be comfortable alone, and I want to prepare myself for that life path. I just don't understand. This isn't even about dating. Humans are inherently social creatures. How can you possibly feel content living through life without connections and people who love you for who you are? Friends, family, community, children. Okay, so we're going to talk about... So team found a clip that I want to show you guys. This is hilarious.
The new norm of capacity, right?
Yeah,
so
so-
now I just have
Yes.
10 pounds I
So
carry.
how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
How did you get down to just
With
one
so
pile of
much
papers?
love for yourself. Yeah, it starts with
Wait,
setting
that was
it,
actually
like,
hilarious. With so much love for yourself. Like, I love that is not the answer. And that's what we say to ourselves. And that doesn't help us. This is me thinking self-love is not the answer.
It helps in the sense of like it frees up, it allows you to actually do things. Like I feel like when we are so angry and mean to ourselves, we get really paralyzed, right? So that like perfectionism of like I'm never gonna be exactly what I need to be because
So-
I'm so messed up is like
Oh, yeah.
then I'm not gonna try, right? So
Yeah.
like I
Oh,
mean,
so you weren't
tongue in
being
cheek, like
sarcastic. That's actually
I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can
Which is-
start there.
Which is hilarious. Okay, so that's Dr. Michaela. If you guys don't know Dr. Michaela, she's awesome. She teaches us many things. She is an awesome complement to my perspective because she's one of these people that understands self-love, right? So she was like, oh my God, with so much self-love. And I was like, ha 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 ha. That's hilarious. Because I don't get self-love. So let's dispense with a couple of things. Is self-love really the answer? Okay.
So is this up to date?
Mostly.
At my last job, we used to...
So, first thing is people will say, if you don't love yourself, how on earth can you love someone else? And I will say, so easily. It is so easy to love somebody else, right? Because other people are decent human beings. Other people are productive. Other people are kind. Other people have shit going on. So this is like the first thing that I don't get. I find that it is actually way easier to love somebody else than it is to love yourself. It's like you can be the worst human being on the planet, and if you see a kitten outside in
Well, I feel it only really goes one of two ways, where it's either entirely easy to love other people or it's entirely easy to love yourself. Like you're going to be alternatively like way too easy on yourself or way too hard, and it's hard to find like a happy medium where you see yourself for what you are. Like self-awareness is kind of hard.
cold. You can love that kitten so easily. You can love your kids. You can love your spouse. Like, if you fall in love with someone, it is so easy to love other people. So this is the first thing that, like, I don't get that perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about how relationships with self-love, without self-love, can be a problem. So we'll get to that. But, like, I think sometimes we forget that oftentimes you're the hardest person to love. And I think sometimes people who haven't felt this internal sense of self-loathing, like, don't understand this, right? So a lot of people will be out there and they'll be like, learn to love yourself first, bruh, and then you can love someone else. And I think
That's a great impression of like a stoner surfer dude. Right? I'm assuming that's what he was doing.
there's like two kinds of...
That's how I would try to impersonate a stoner surfer dude. A stoner surfer dude, yeah. By the way, I did actually get a different mic, so we'll see how that works out. It's been stupidly trying to hijack my sound or something, hence the analog headphones instead of the wireless ones. I'll have to see if I can figure that out. It's annoying.
people. There's people who sort of needed to discover self-love, and then there's people who have self-loathing. And those aren't quite the same, right? There's some of us who are like, don't really know how to love ourselves, but we're somewhere in like the neutral, like somewhere around zero. And then you have to learn how to love yourself. And then there's those of us who self-loathe. Those of us who...
you'd probably have to ask an actual psychologist, but I'm gonna guess having like a solid family life growing up can have a huge impact on that. Or if you had people who did care about you and who had like a balanced perspective of you and would compliment you when you need to be complimented and insult you or edify you. Sorry, not insult. That's probably not productive. But like it would tell you where you needed to improve as well. Like that can have a huge impact going into your adulthood. Like what you're willing or how you see yourself, perhaps.
Go to bed every night saying tomorrow will be different, and then waking up tomorrow and repeating the same fucking day over and over and over again. And then there's like people, like the reason that it's so hard to love yourself is because you know you, right? Like you know, like this person really could be doing so much better. And they kind of choose not to. Because many of us live lives of like not self-love, but like self-appeasement. Where it's like this thing that I'm waking up with today is really not having a great day. So I'm going to just, I don't know, I'm going to order a Philly cheesesteak with a side of fried rice. And I'm going to play Ruby's Resolve until I fix this artificial life on the internet instead of fixing my own. So this is where like, I get it. I think that self-love is hard to do.
And that's the point to be made too about the notion of like, well, of escapes, right? Whether it's drugs, whether it's drinking, whether it's games or whatever. It feels like the more you try to escape to a different world, the more kind of this world that you're living in, sucks a little bit, right? It's like this is the most, this is the fundamental reality here. Okay, this is the real this is the real reality. So you kind of have to deal with it. I don't know.
On your own. It's really something that I'm starting to sort of get it, but I still really don't. So first
maybe it's better to say you have to decide where you're going to put your efforts and what you're going to put your efforts towards making better. Like you only have kind of a limited amount of energy and intuition and or intelligence and whatnot that you can put towards any given problem. And you kind of have to put enough into it to make it a worthwhile endeavor, kind of. So that's what I reckon.
Is when people say, look, it's hard to love you can't love other people unless you learn to love yourself. I don't think that's true. I think it's actually way easier to love other people. I think the other really scary thing is that self-love cannot be learned by you. It has to be taught. This is what's so scary. And there's so much data to back this up. Like, so this idea, right, of like being in a room trying to learn self-love is almost impossible to do. We'll give you guys a path at the end of this section. Like, so I'll share with y'all how you actually do this, but this is not how self-love is actually learned. You don't learn self-love by sitting in a room by yourself. The sad truth is that most human beings on the planet learn self-love through social conditioning. And there's tons of this. Doesn't mean that
it would be interesting if there was some sort of experiment that you could raise a person. I would be 90% sure they'd actually done something like somewhere in the world actually, where you would raise an individual in almost entire isolation and see like what would develop from that. Like what type of issues would arise, what type of strengths or weaknesses would present themselves in the character of the individual. It's strange. It'd be quite strange, I think.
You can't do anything about it. But I hate this because sometimes I'm left in a situation where someone is like, how do I learn self-love? And then I look at all this pile of science, and we'll get to that in a second, and I'm like, look, learning self-love by yourself is hard. And then people hear that and they're like, well, looks like I'm fucked because there's a loneliness epidemic. No one cares about me. I'm socially isolated.
I have to find a way to bleep that stuff a little bit. I should try a little bit harder because I don't like it. I don't mind hearing it, but I prefer not to have it in my own videos.
And it's like I'm not trying
to be fair. I don't like to hear it too much either. I have a very I feel like I have a very good imagination, and I feel like words just kind of poof. They kind of set off. There are words that are very evocative, and that's one of them.
Tell you that you're screwed. We're going to tell y'all how to try to fix this problem. And I think there is a lot that you can do. But I hate to be the one to say that human beings are biologically made to be social creatures. And if we really look at the science behind self-love, it is something that is socially conditioned, just like many other things. So I don't know if you guys have heard of something called attachment theory. So this is a very, very prominent theory in psychology that talks about how human beings form relationships, especially, and how our relationships are determined by our earliest caregivers. So there are three kinds of attachment. There's secure attachment, which about 50% of the people on the planet have. There's anxious attachment, which we'll get to, where people are worried that other people don't like them. So even if you're in a relationship, you don't feel comfortable in that relationship. And then there's about 25% of people have anxious attachment. 20% of people have something called avoidant attachment. These are people who have learned that emotional bonds are scary things to be avoided at all costs.
That's strange, yeah. Well, this is, I think, a problem that I think can arise in, like, the mind of maybe narcissists or people like that, where they almost, like, they'll confuse control and connection, right? For example, like, I think the notion would be that connection does not necessarily entail control. Control has connection as a prerequisite of it. But connection is not, like, it doesn't follow that if you're connected to a thing, if it's a part of you, that you must needs have control over it. But I think narcissists can fall into that trap of believing that you must be in control of anything that is a part of you. And consequently, if you cannot control anything, then it's not a part of you, which is just not the case if you think about it for half a second, because your body is doing all sorts of stuff right now and you have no direct control over. I mean, in theory, you could maybe, do some sort of surgery that would govern some of it or something like that, or indirectly you could do something, but you're not in control right now. Your heart's beating, your cells are doing all sorts of chemical reactions. You're not really in control of any of this, and yet your body is very much a part of you, right? It's the same kind of with other people to some extent. The fact that you are connected to them does not necessarily mean that you are in control, and there's certainly, hopefully, a degree of influence or symbiosis there, but again, connection does not necessarily entail control.
And so about 20% of people are avoidant, and they try to distance themselves. So then 5% of people have disorganized attachment. That's when people have very serious problems growing up. But there's a really good way to sort of understand these three forms of attachment, and I think about it in terms of sex and intimacy.
I have to look up disorganized attachment sometime.
So if you're securely attached, sex becomes an expression of emotional intimacy, right? So I feel a certain way about you. I'm deeply in love. I'm playful. I'm supportive. I feel supported. And so the sexual activity, the physical intimacy becomes a reflection of that. So sometimes sex is passionate. Sometimes it's playful. Sometimes it's a chore, which can be totally fine. And then there's anxiously attached people where sex becomes a hook for emotional intimacy. So these people will oftentimes engage in sexual activity to try to pull someone in emotionally. I'm going to have sex with you so that you don't abandon.
I feel like the success rate on that cannot be very good, at least not long term. I don't know if that would be more a woman thing than a guy thing, but I guess I don't know. But it feels like just the fact that someone's having sex with you does not necessarily mean they like you, especially if it's like some sort of like very capricious sort of intimacy. Capricious? Presumptuous? I don't know. Where you're doing it right at the beginning of the relationship. I feel like, especially like if you just meet a person and you're like immediately like I just want to hook them into a relationship. Like I don't know if that would. I don't think that would work. Just intuitively, it feels like it wouldn't.
And me, I'm going to have sex with you to make you happy. Please.
It would not be the basis of some sort of like stable. It would not necessarily be the basis of some sort of stable long-term relationship. All right.
Stay, I will do whatever you want. And then avoidant attachment people use sex as a barrier to emotional intimacy. This is just a purely physical thing. There's no feelings involved. Once I buck...
It feels weird, kind of. I guess maybe that works. Yeah, I don't know.
Get you into a sexual object and we're in a situationship and it's friends with benefits, then I don't have to deal with all these emotions. I don't want any of these emotions. I don't want any of this emotional connection. That kind of explains these three attachment styles, okay? We've done a ton of videos on attachment. So here's the scary thing. People who are securely attached tend to have the highest level of self-love. And secure attachment comes through our conditioning. It comes through the way that our parents raised us. So if your parents treat you with respect, if your parents treat you with unconditional,
I don't know if I agree with that entirely, but like I think that there is a huge point to be made that like the way your parents raise you, how you grow up, that's like a huge impact on how you view yourself, how you view the world, how you view all of that. So I guess maybe it's quite a bit. There's a good bit of truth there.
love, right? Then you learn to love yourself. If I take a kid and I bully him every day, that child will internalize the way that human beings treat them. That's what we do. Like, that's like literally what we do. So if you take a little kid and you say, oh my God, this Witta baby is the second incarnation of Jesus Christ. Oh my God, my Witta baby is the best Witta baby in the world. And my Witta baby has the best poo-poos and the best smile and is just the smartest Witta baby. And anything that he does wrong is not wrong. It's your fault. If you raise a child like that, the child will receive that conditioning and they will become a raging narcissist. They will become incredibly entitled. If I abuse a child growing up, they will internalize a negative sense of self-worth. So the first thing we got to understand, for the majority of human beings on the planet, the way that they determine their self-love is through the way that they are treated. Now, this creates a huge problem because if you were mistreated growing up,
well, and this is a huge issue. I think there's a reason why, dynasties aren't really a thing. Is because people, I tend to think it's because people who are raised in the houses of individuals who are rich, and they're raised in that type of environment, they come to think that that's just the default state of existence, and there's a lack of competition, there's lack of striving, and I think that type of, the bubble that they live in allows them to develop a really type of narcissistic worldview where the world exists to please me, every blow is softened, there's no type of really hard knocks that they really experience in life, and because of that, they just get this really warped perspective of reality, right?
If you don't love yourself very much, if you have some degree of self-loathing, which is usually deserved, let's be honest. And I say this as someone who had a lot of self-loathing towards myself. And basically, I think a lot of it was justified. I think that's the kind of thing that really, frightens me as a psychiatrist. Sometimes I have patients who come into my office and they're like, I suck at life and I don't do this and I don't do this and I don't do this and I don't do this. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I see what you're saying, man. I actually, I get what you're saying. Now, what Dr. Michaela said is really, really important because she says,
well, I guess I don't know, to what extent should you find your identity in what you are versus what you do? Because, the idea is, okay, so you can't really change what you are as far as, immutable characteristics. What you do with that is something that's very much, or it seems like that's a far more doable thing. Say, okay, here's what I am. Accept that it's writ. Okay, this. I'm never going to be 6 foot tall. I'm never going to be blah, blah, blah. Never going to be, a great talker or something like that. But here's what I've got to work with. Let's make the best of it. I feel like that's maybe a more healthy perspective to take on it.
Even if that's true, having all that anger towards yourself doesn't help you, right? So this is where there's a lot of subtlety here. But if we're talking about self-loathing and self-love, even if the self-loathing is justified, is it productive? And that's what's so hard about this, right? Because if you've been conditioned in this way, you can't just wake up one day and fix it. If y'all want to dive deep into the most important topics for our community, check out HG Memberships. So the first thing to understand is that there needs to be no outcome from small talk. This is a Vasana too. Your mind is Vasanas all the way down. So the key thing about detachment is not that you don't have wants, it is that your wants do not control you. Membership grants you access to monthly...
I was thinking about something. I completely lost it because I was looking at this. Darn you, Dr. K. No.
Streams, as well as a back catalog of a year's worth of content, in addition to quests and so much more. If you're interested, you can sign up for $10 a month at healthygamer.gg/memberships or click the link in the description below. Hope to see you there. So what do you do about it, right? So if we're in this situation where there's a lot of self-loathing, maybe there's an absence of self-love, we're also stuck because self-love is largely something that we learn from other people. We can gain it by ourselves. There are certain things that we can do. So how do we gain it? And this is where, I kind of say this as a psychiatrist, this is where therapy works really well, right? So if you think about what therapy is.
Okay, so is this from a happy birthday stream? I was just thinking, like, why is there balloons in the background? I'm assuming this is his birthday.
Therapy around self-love is, first of all, observing your patterns. What is the way in which you talk to yourself? Critically kind of analyzing.
Oh, no, I remember what it was. It feels like I was gonna say some in a pithy sort of way that, like, it feels like one of the best ways to make a person powerless is to convince them that they are powerless in some regard. Like, it feels like that's kind of one of the glitches a little bit. As, like, in theory, you have what is effectively objective reality, but also our perception of reality is very subjective. So if you can control that subjective perception of it, huzzah!
Does this actually help you or not? The problem with self-loathing is that when we listen to it, we don't actually improve our circumstances at all. And this is the really, really scary thing. I see this in so many patients where there comes this like critical point that it's really hard.
Come on, what was it? No.
Hard to dig yourself out of, which is if you have self-loathing to the point
Sorry, I was thinking about something else there. So I remember the thing that I wanted to say right there, I think. But
that you deserve not to be happy, then things become really hard. It's almost like this psychological event horizon where once you deserve to be unhappy, then it's like congruent. Does that make sense? Then it's like, oh, I deserve punishment. This is my punishment, right? Like, I deserve this. So there's this weird kind of like martyrdom that I see in some patients who have a lot of self-loathing where it's like, okay, other people, deserve way better than I do. I don't deserve a whole lot. I'm pathetic. I'm a loser. I screwed up, right? And then the moment...
Well, I guess I don't know how much I agree with this part. Look, obviously Christian, I think we as people, we do fall, we do fail. But this is kind of a Christian thing. But the notion that there is nothing valuable inside of us is, I think, entirely wrong. I do think we live in a fallen world. We are fallen individuals. We make mistakes. We sin. We come short of the glory of God. But within that, you must see that there is something valuable inside of you. Right? There's some potential there that may be unrealized potential, but there is that worth that is there to some extent.
That you stop deserving something, then you don't strive for it. Like, you don't feel entitled to it. So whenever there's this spark that could turn into a fire of motivation and change, you tend to quash it down. And this is what really gets people in trouble in relationships. And when people say you have to learn self-love before you enter a relationship, I think this is what they're talking about. Because if you don't love yourself and you enter a relationship, you are entering a minefield. You're entering a war zone. Because if you don't love yourself, there are a couple of really terrible things that can happen. The first is you are vulnerable to
maybe self-respect. That would be, in my mind, that would be like the better way of describing it. I don't like the notion of self-love, but well, and to be fair, like, I think the whole notion of trying to control your feelings towards yourself is not. It's one of those things where you almost have to. I think I've said this before, but I feel like action or instinct tends to follow action, not the other way around. Like, you can't just decide, you can't just will yourself to love who you are as a person. But if you act in a manner that is respecting of yourself and who you are as a person and whatnot like that, if you treat your body with respect, if you treat your being with respect to some extent, and labor in that regards, I imagine that type of, the feeling of self-respect or self-love would come along with that.
Abuse, manipulation, and being taken advantage of. And we see this all the time where oftentimes people with anxious attachment, people who are afraid that you're going to leave, will enter into relationships with people.
That's the thumbnail. Abracadabra.
Who are afraid that you're going to leave, will enter into relationships with people who...
What was it? That was 1453.
Who are avoidantly attached. So the very person that you shouldn't be dating is exactly who you're attracted to. We also see this in cases of borderline personality.
It's like going to get food when you're really, really hungry. Probably not the best of ideas.
Personality disorder dates person with narcissistic personality disorder. So the person who thinks I'm the best thing on the planet ends up dating someone who will absolutely mold to them. So the reason people will say, okay, you have to learn self-love first.
It feels like that's actually probably true to some extent. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Is because if you don't have self-love and you enter into a relationship, if you're not careful, the person that you enter into the relationship with will be able to take so much advantage of you. Because when they mistreat you, you don't deserve to be treated well, right? So when people say this, they're not, I mean, I think it's challenging, but they're absolutely coming from a valid...
Yeah, I guess like I was saying before, like if you end up in the other end of the spectrum, you get some sort of sycophant who just says that you're the best thing in the world. Look, it feels like you might be on... Yeah, if you're not a well-balanced individual, you might be on either one end of this thing or the other. Yeah.
place, which is
well,
like...
What I was going to say is that it feels like... He had mentioned something about this before, but you have like what effectively, like in these types of relationships, you would have effectively what you would call like a folie à deux. Where you, like, if you're one individual who thinks this, it's bad, but if you're two individuals who kind of are building on each other's instabilities, it's really, really bad. Anyways, that's Why You Can't Love Yourself by Dr. K, aka Healthy Gamers. GG. Go check that out if you want to.